Thank you. So it's Tuesday, April the 19th, 2022 at 9 o'clock, and I'm calling this meeting to order of the Woodlands Hearing Board Committee. So the first item is item A, application for exemption. And item B is...
Are you hearing this?
Yeah, just with you. That's somebody who's cleaning the floors.
Yeah, sounds like a vacuum cleaner.
I'll give I'm a minute there.
There we go.
Okay.
Cleaning lady off the left.
But should he get sucked up or is he coming back? Where'd he go?
I think he's gone.
Okay. So first one is the application for exemption. And B is, thank you, Stefan's back. B is notice of the resumption of the public meeting.
Yes, so if I can help the board to
Yes,
kickstart the matter. Sorry about that noise. Not sure what was going on, so I just clicked out and came back in.
Okay.
I am wearing my my earbuds, so maybe that was sort of a you were hearing inside my head, right? Lots of noise.
That was very strange.
That's why it sounded like a vacuum.
Yeah, we thought you got sucked up.
Okay, so here we are. We have the original application of February 15th, 2022. That was before the board for consideration. And in that application, the impetus of it was Mr. Rombout's wishing to do some clearing for drainage works. But in addition, while doing that, also squaring off the entire woodland as depicted in the materials. So resulting in about 20 some odd acres of woodland destruction. And of course, at that time, Tim Payne, through his report, would recommend acceptance of the application on the basis of for the drainage only, but not the broader squaring off of the lands for farm purposes. So at that time, the board asked that Mr. Payne and Mr. Rombouts engage in discussions to see if there could be alternative solutions, because at the point during the last meeting, there was discussion about alternative lands for replanting purposes should you grant the full 20 some odd acres for planting purposes and drainage purposes and farming purposes on the one lands. Maybe then typically would go to the applicant first, but maybe Mr. Payne can provide an update on those discussions. And once Mr. Payne has provided that update, provide Mr. Rombouts with an opportunity to comment on the discussions only, and then we'll flip over to the substance of the application.
Okay, thank you, and through you, Chair Han. Yeah, so from the last Woodlands Hearings Board meeting, Mr. Rombouts and I had a discussion over the phone, discussing the application and if there is some alternatives. We couldn't really come to an agreement on an alternative. It was left with me to try and come up with maybe another solution or option or something, which I couldn't really come up with. So at that point, Mr. Rombouts and I kind of agreed to disagree on any type of alternative options or anything like that that weren't previously discussed. So the application now stands as it did at the first meeting.
Mr. Rombouts, if you want to reply on just the discussions.
Okay. Yeah, no, that was basically the talks that Tim and I had was, yeah, Obviously, I'd like to square everything up. Tim would like to leave as much area covered in green as he can, which I totally understand as well. I'm not for clearing everything for sure. And yeah, do you want me to talk about at all at the moment about Tim's report at all, or is that for later?
No, I think that's good. I guess you had the opportunity to talk about the discussions. Now, perhaps talk about the substance of your application and Mr. Payne's report, and then I'll go back to Mr. Payne, and then I'll go back to you for the final word.
Okay. I was reading through it again, and I just want to make sure, I guess, that everything is clear. In the final report that Tim sent out for the marginal land that I would like to trade off. I forget the wording exactly. I don't have it in front of me here, but it said that it was all land that wasn't being farmed at the moment, but that is actually inaccurate. It's pretty, I mean, you're going on GPS, so it's a little bit, can be one way or the other, an acre here, an acre there, right? But I'm trying to be as close as I can. We're pretty close to acre for acre, and there's roughly 13 to 14 acres of that marginal land that is being farmed yearly, that I would like to put back into natural vegetation. The rest of it can be farmed. We just kind of started easing away a little bit because we didn't like the erosion that was happening, so we've kind of let it grow into grass, which is holding some of the ground, but not near as much as we'd like it to. There is in that area, in those areas, there's 4 different locations, but there's 3 specific spots where you can actually, the erosion's down far enough, you can actually see the field tile. One location you can measure 4 tiles across. They're 4-foot spacing, so it's pretty easy to tell how far the tile are apart. And also with that, those areas that I would like to put back in is kind of the same theory as squaring the bush up. I'm also basically trying to square those 4 areas up as well to make it as efficient for equipment and overlap and spray and all of the different things that we do. Try to basically do the same thing in those 4 areas as I'd like to do at that bush ground. Sorry, just checking my notes here. And as I said previously in the other meeting, I would work with the Conservation Authority on these marginal grounds, help build berms, do whatever needs to be done on any of those to try to slow the flooding and slow the erosion. Whatever they think needs done, I've got the equipment and we can do the work for it. I know the last time there was some concern and some comment on how long it takes for trees to regrow back in versus taking trees out, that there's going to be a bit of a lag in between there as far as green cover goes. And I just, want to let you know, I guess, as far as taking, depending on what the decision is, it won't be something where that chunk of bush would be cleared within probably even 3 years, to be totally honest. We've got a wedding in our yard. My oldest getting married this summer, so as you can imagine, fairly busy making sure everything's perfect in the yard. And I don't go to do work in fields or bushes or anywhere unless the ground conditions are fit, because you just do too much damage. So it'll be a slow process for sure, no matter what we do back there. And I guess, yeah, that's about all I had.
Thank you. Mr. Payne, maybe you can respond, please.
Yeah, sure. Based on the timing and weather, absolutely, I was not out at the restoration location behind the home farm. So, Mackie's correct, basically looking at the 2020 air photography and looking at where agriculture was and where it wasn't. So certainly, a few acres here and there of what I believed was already taken out of production versus what is staying in production. it sounds like there's lots of erosion and some serious concerns in those areas. Other than that, the report is the report, and my findings are the findings. So, I don't think I have any other discussion.
And Mr. Rumboats, last word to you.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's there's obviously partially, I'm not going to lie. There's obviously, it's always financially better to be farming a nice big square piece, et cetera, right? I mean, I'm not gonna deny that. But at the same time, I'm looking at an acre for acre exchange, so it's not like I'm wanting 22 acres without giving anything back. And as far as environmental concerns, I'm not an environmentalist, but I do care about the environment, and I believe that big square fields are best, and ground that floods and erodes should probably be in trees, and we shouldn't be working that ground. So I guess I'm hoping and trying to do kind of all of those in one shot, I guess. So that's where I'm coming from. So thank you.
Thank you. So, Madam Chair, I believe we have somebody on the line from the public who wishes to make a comment. Would you grant leave for that comment?
Yes, please.
Hi, my name is Mary Martin, and I am here as a representative of Lambton Wildlife. And actually, as Mr. Romboats has said, I would think that Mr. Romboats is an environmentalist, and I would classify myself as an environmentalist as well. I would like to commend Mr. Romboats for his plan on his marginal land. Certainly, it sounds like that property does need some erosion control. My concern is that we are talking about replacing an established woodlot that's part of a larger whole with land that is currently marginal land. And certainly there are programs to help Mr. Romboats do that. Mr. Payne, I think, could find him some money so that he would be able to do that improvement and protect his property without a whole lot of cost outlay on his behalf. My concern is for the larger woodlot. The property that is going to be, or is proposed to be removed, is part of a larger woodlot. I have not yet seen, I understand from our woodlot protection bylaws that if we're going to take out a large amount of woodlot, that we need an environmental impact study. I have not yet seen that. Does anybody know? Can anybody fill me in on that aspect?
Mr. Payne, are you able to answer that question?
Yes, so it is in the bylaw, but not necessarily always required to do an environmental impact study. So at this point, based on what I had observed and recommendations, I didn't feel there was a necessity to have the additional cost to the applicant for an environmental impact study. Yes, it's in the bylaw, but not always required, like a full plan of subdivision or something like that.
Thank you very much. I would just like to reiterate Mr. Payne's comments in his recommendations, where he is recommending that the full woodlot not be taken down. And I would like to draw your attention to the fact that the ecological value of a larger woodlot is more significant than little small patches here and there. And certainly in terms of water retention and wildlife value, it is of greater benefit to keep a contiguous larger area of woodlot intact rather than cut off little bits. And I think it's a feeling that just wanting more property for tillage is not in the best interests of the county plan, in that we need to preserve our woodlots because they are a limited amount and of great utility to the entire county. So in terms of ecological value, water retention, carbon sequestration, that those values are greater than taking them down. And of course we need food, but we have to balance those two things. So I believe that Mr. Rombout needs his tiling done, but the purpose of squaring up a field is not in conjunction with what our plan is for our county. Does anyone have any questions for me?
Mr. Rumboats?
I guess I don't know if you have the map in front of you where as I've called it, 4 areas are, but those 4 areas that I would like to trade off are not 4 isolated local areas. It's 4 areas that actually all connect together. And those 4 areas actually, in my opinion, as far as wildlife goes, etc., actually improves that area very much, because all 4 of those areas touch each other, and it's taking a very narrow area along Bear Creek and widening it out to a much larger area, which actually connects the forest property, the bushland, etc., near where I would like to clear, with the Warwick Conservation Area, also with the 402 corridor, and a bunch of other area on that side, which there's really no good corridor for wildlife the way it stands. They basically have to run straight across open fields to go from one concession to the other, versus if this was widened out, it would, in my opinion, would make a much nicer area for wildlife, etc., to travel and to really, truly, honestly connect the woodlots to make them more accessible and much more usable for wildlife. And I guess I forgot one point as well earlier that I noticed on my notes here. The bush ground that is to be removed, and I'm sure Tim Payne would comment to this, although it looks like maybe he's gone. When him and I were back at the bush, there is a very, very large amount of dead white ash in the bush, so and very large amounts of bush that I'd have a hard time even calling bush, to be honest. So I would hope that we're creating better bush ground versus what's there, and I think personally doing a better job for wildlife as well. That's just my thoughts.
Mary?
I would like to commend Mr. Rombout. The property that he is talking about putting into treed area, that would be of benefit. So I'm not doubting that is a good thing that he is planning to do. That's wonderful. My concern is even though the woodlot has a lot of downed ash, that ash is going to create nurse logs for more trees, and those trees are connected to the woodlot that's to the south of Mr. Rombout's property, so that it's actually part of a larger area, and we would like to preserve those large areas of woodlot, what little ones we have left in our very fragmented landscape. So I'm not denying that his future plans are definitely beneficial, but what they don't do is we're not counting apples to apples here. We're counting 2 different things. One is an established woodlot, and one is a newly created woodlot. So they don't have the same ecological value. They don't have the same carbon sequestration. They don't have the same impact on water quality. So in the best situation, Mr. Rombout would get his tillage area removed, and the remaining woodlot with the silver maples in it would still be there. And ideally, he would also move forward with preserving the erosion, combating the erosion on that other property across the road. Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Warden Marriott.
Thank you, Chair Hand. I think Mr. Payne was gone. I would have liked to have heard his opinion on the comment from Mr. Rumbouts about the dead ash. Tim, did you happen to catch part of that? I know your report probably will have what's good and what's not in there, so I didn't know whether you're able to comment on that or not. Oh, he's just connecting now, so he probably hasn't heard all this. Seems to be having technical problems.
He froze up a couple times.
I could repeat for Tim when he gets on if you'd like, whatever you'd like, Kevin.
Okay, great. Tim, are you able to hear us now? Nope, he's gone.
You didn't get any kind of email or anything to say what's happening? Actually, Mayor Arnold?
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the reasons why I wanted us to go back and have another look at it by Tim and Mackie was in regards to if there could be some type of a compromise situation. I think in the original report, there was a piece that from the tile upwards in the drawing that Tim was okay with that being removed as part of a trade. And I don't have an issue with taking that out because 3 corridors that are already cut up and that little bit of bush lot that's left to me does not make sense from a farmer point of view. I understand Mr. Mackey would like to have it squared off, but I think that's a good compromise at this time. And Madam Chair, in listening to everybody's comments and stuff, I agree with everyone's comments. I don't have a problem with them. And I think that they're all very valid. But at this point, Madam Chair, I would make a recommendation or a motion that we go back to that option that Tim had sent us, taking from the bottom tile drain and up in the picture and being allowed to remove that. And then Mr. Mackey or Mr. Rumbouts could take and do his planting along that corridor that he wants to open up. I think the corridor is a good idea. I have a couple of farms that I work and I've purposely left corridors to connect. And so I applaud him for doing that. And I think it's the right thing to do there. But I also appreciate that it's a pain to work on angles and everything in a field. However, I think this would be a good compromise, that original option that Mr. Payne had suggested to the committee in the February report. And I'd be more than happy to make that a motion.
Thank you, Councillor Arnold. But it was my understanding that compromise wasn't agreed to. Am I incorrect?
Well, it's a recommendation from Mr. Payne. And I think Mr. Rumbouts, when he chatted last time that he was willing to do that as a compromise, not that he wanted to do that as a preference. He wanted to take the whole piece out.
Okay.
I got that impression, and maybe I'm wrong, but I got that impression that he'd be willing to settle there instead of getting nothing.
Right.
And I think I don't want to do an all or nothing here. I think that there is a compromise.
Right, and that's what I was hoping for too, but in the interest of Mr. Payne not being inputting.
Madam Chair, he is back.
Yes. He's back?
Yes,
okay.
He is.
Okay.
So I won't worry about my question since Councillor Arnold has a motion on the floor.
Okay. Do you want to repeat your motion then, so Councillor Arnold, so that Mr. Payne can hear it?
Okay, Madam Chair, my motion would be that we deny the complete removal, but we allow the removal from the farthest drain to the edge of the bush lot going to the top of the picture. And I can't bring up the pictures because I'm working off 2 computers just to be online with you. So, and I can't remember what number of acres that was, but it looks like about half of what is in the original request.
If I can read this, is it the option that was discussed at page 18 of 25 or the first? Is it this one?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, that's well, no, there was another option there, Stefan, that showed right from the tile, the one that's going to be totally covered, and that whole corner taken out, anything above there. From there up, that's not the below that line, but from there up, I thought that was the option, sir. I could be wrong because I'm trying to go by memory here.
So is Tim on the line? Because I see 3 options in the packages. This option.
Stefan, Tim has his hand up.
The one with the B on it?
Madam Chair, Tim has his hand up.
Okay, please speak. I can't see him.
Yes, thank you. And certainly my apologies, internet connection. So with regards to the motion on the table, that option was not listed in the application or discussed with Mr. Rombouts. Mr. Arnold brought that up at the first Woodlands Hearings Board as an option. And at that time, Mr. Rombouts was not interested in that because that still would not straighten the woodlot for his farming practices. So the option was, it was roughly 6 acres across the north end, or which Mr. Rombouts was not interested in. He was interested in the entire removal.
Mr. Rombouts?
So we actually, just with the weather and everything, we still haven't, we're not even 100% sure if the 6 acres, that was part of the previous discussion, if the 6 acres straight across the north end can actually accomplish our drainage. That, according to the survey that the drainage company did, it's looking very doubtful that there will be enough fall to run straight west and then run straight south with the drainage, because it's fairly flat ground there, that it would be, we wouldn't have the fall that we need. We'd actually be going uphill to get to the corner and then back downhill. And that's where the one picture that Stefan showed there quickly had the 3 lines, the one that's going through and then the 2 coming in. So you ended up with 2 triangles. That was, yes, that one there. The yellow is existing. The 2 red are are what drainage contractor recommended. But as far as Mr. Arnold, his recommendation at the last meeting, yes, I was willing to go for something like that. I just didn't know if, as was recommended by the council, if Tim and I could, work something else out where we would be able to square everything up. But as far as going to that existing drain, I would be willing to, work with the county to do something like that as well.
So, Madam Chair, my question would be to Mr. Payne. I respect his opinion and would ask that if he would be agreeable to that, and then work with the landowner to put those trees that he's going to remove, whatever we would require, to put in that other corridor. Anything that he does would be appropriate to have it in that other corridor. So I'd ask Tim if he's okay with that as an option.
Mr. Payne?
Mr. Arnold, if you could just confirm what we're talking about for an option.
From the existing tile drain in yellow. Yeah, and then that everything above it. I think that's the option that I spoke about the last meeting, Tim, and then
Right.
Mr. Rumbouts didn't seem to be in favor of that because, as you said, it wouldn't square off exactly what he wants. But I'm trying to find a compromise here that'll work for everybody other than having 2 triangular pieces of bush and a couple of 140-foot corridors through them that is going to be really not beneficial for anyone, including Mr. Rumbaugh, other than to walk through with four-wheeler or go hunting back there. So,
well, the rationale for the 140 feet was so he could get his sprayer through there. So he does intend to crop over that. Typically, closed tile drainage through a woodlot would not exceed 100 feet.
okay.
But given that Mr. Rombouts would like to maintain over that, and he has such large equipment, there was expressed interest to go to 140 feet, which would already be an accommodation rather than, the typical max of 100 feet. Usually closed drainage is even less than that. Looking through the OMAFRA reports, there's no real clear identification other than, yes, in wetter areas, when you have wetter species like poplar and willow as such, they have a tendency to have roots that spread farther. So I'm not sure protocol on this, how we go back and forth on an application with the recommendation. I'm not sure if Stefan could maybe elaborate how we continue to go back and forth here. I certainly appreciating what Mr. Arnold's saying, but the application was for the entire removal, and options were presented that weren't in the interest of the applicant at the time.
Mr. Rombouts?
As far as and I agree with Tim. There was a concession on the 140 feet. Not going to lie about that. That had to do with the size of our sprayer in order to be able to get through that area. But also there was consideration in there as well because of, as I said previously, how flat the ground actually is through this area. And I don't understand all this. This is all tile drainage stuff, but the flatter you are, the bigger the tile you need. What we needed to put through there, through the original area and through these other areas, is large enough that it can't be rolled off. So you can't use a non-perforated tile. It has to be sections of tile that are connected together. Therefore, the sections are basically a perforation, which trees have a very large tendency to head to water. That's what they want, and if there's a gap in a tile, they're going to plug it. That's just how it works. So that was also part of the consideration at the time with the 140 feet was to try to keep the tree roots far enough away so as not to plug everything up. So.
Okay, so Stefan, I'm looking for a little direction here because I'm confused on
Yep.
the comments from Mr. Payne on the original application.
Yep, I think on the original application, we still have the recommendation from Mr. Payne, and I'm not hearing him say anything that would providing an opinion that's contrary to or any different than his original recommendation. And his original recommendation was to deny the full clearance, but to allow clearance for the drainage purposes. And that is on the accommodation that was just explained, the 140-foot strip, which would, and Mr. Payne can correct me if I'm wrong, result in this being cleared, the red being cleared, and only the red being cleared. So that's the recommendation that you have from Mr. Payne, and I haven't heard anything differently from him today, despite the other options that were discussed. Of course, now Council Member Arnold discussed another option that is a possibility, which would be on this graphic, but from the original drain, clearing all of this, all above it. I call it above it because it's just above it on my page, but not below it, above it. And then, if I understand correctly, with that option having at least a 1-for-1 replanting on those other lands that were identified by Mr. Rombouts. So again, you have really two pieces in front of you. The one piece is the original recommendation, which is to deny the clearance other than for the drainage, which is those triangular lands, those three pieces. And of course, Member Arnold has suggested the other option, which is above the current drain with the replacement on the other lands.
Warden Marriott?
Yeah, I was just going to say there was not a seconder for Councillor Arnold's motion, and we keep discussing it, so I'm not sure. I see he has his hand up, so we'll go to him, but I was just going to, I wasn't willing to second that motion, so I'm not sure if anybody else would be or not.
Councillor Arnold?
Thanks, Madam Chair. With only Kevin and I, there's nobody else to second it because you can't, of course.
Yeah.
And I think there was a third option that Stefan had showed us, and that was to take that top corner out and leave the majority of that upper piece in place. And that was the third option that we looked at. So my understanding now, like that piece there in the red. And committee, what I would do is I will move that one since my other motion lost, and I'll see if I can get a seconder for it.
Yeah, just trying to, I don't have my original copy. How many acres, Mr. Payne, could you comment on how many acres that would be?
Yes, just let me pull it up and I can look to screen share that.
I think it was 6.2, Kevin, but I'm not sure.
That sounds about right.
In the true sense of the word, we have the chair.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kevin.
I'm like, maybe 10 more minutes.
Sorry, Steve, I missed that. Were you talking to me?
Yeah, I was, but that's okay. Nothing that was irrelevant to anything. I was just trying to be a smarty. So, it's been a long day already. So anyways, I'd be willing to move that option that Stefan just lifted and showed us.
And this option has, it's marked as 5.25 acres of removal.
Yeah.
No, not that one. Stefan,
That doesn't
you
look
had
like
another
it.
one there.
That's not the right picture.
Correct. That's Tim. That's got the computer. Yep. Nope. Not that one, Tim.
Oh, we don't want that. That's the one.
That
there.
one.
That's the one. Yep.
Yeah.
So I'd be willing to move that, and we'll see what happens there
So
with
I'm
my other
sorry.
partner in crime.
I got waylaid for a moment and I didn't hear Mr. Payne's response. Would he be willing to accept this compromise as workable?
I don't know if that's the correct terminology because it's not really up to Mr. Payne to.
Okay. Well, all I was getting at is he made a recommendation that we not accept the application. So now we have a revised application. So I'm looking for his professional opinion.
Is Tim on the line? Tim, are you on? He might be. There he is.
I am.
Okay, so Tim, there was a question on this option, and I think the board is asking for your professional opinion on the option that is currently on the screen.
This option was discussed with the applicant, and at that time, I felt that would be a viable option for the applicant. But since then, Mr. Roundabouts was not in favor of that for his application, and was not sure that would still fix his drainage issues. So this is just an option that was discussed with the applicant, and during the application, the applicant decided this was not a viable option.
Okay, I'd be willing to second it if it was a workable option, because I do kind of agree with Mr. Arnold that it's kind of a compromise of allowing drainage but not removing the and squaring it up but not removing the whole. Because Mr. Payne has recommended denial of the application, so yeah, I'd be willing to second this. I'm not sure if we'll leave it at that.
If I could be of assistance, Madam
sir.
Chair, maybe
Yes,
maybe the applicant, now that he knows where the board is leading, maybe the applicant can make comment on this. Because if I'm reading the tea leaves correctly, the board is in favor of this option as the only option alternative to the recommendation of Mr. Payne.
Yes.
So, Mr. Rombouts, if you wish to make a comment, I guess it's this or the original suggestion from Mr. Payne. Your comments?
Yep. The I guess comment and maybe a little bit of clarification. I guess I'd be okay with this. As long as, I guess, as I said previously, as long as if we do our elevation shots with my contractor, and as long as we can get the fall that we need to actually get the water to flow from the what is on the right hand side of that picture that we're looking at across and then down, as long as we have enough fall to get there, I would be willing to work with this, I guess, at this point. And then the other clarification, I guess, then when Tim proposed this idea to me, and I chose to go with full application to try to square things up. This, if I recall correctly, this proposal was not subject to any replant whatsoever on the marginal land. This was just a straight up tile drainage proposal by Mr. Payne, if I recall correctly. That's a few months ago now, but so just clarification on that, I guess.
If I may,
Thank you.
so the original tile, there is an exemption process for straight tile, which would have been this right here. The rationale for removal would be for farm tile drainage, so that through the bylaw would be a $275 application fee, with information from the licensed drainage contractor identifying that that is the location and requirement for providing farm tile drainage to existing agriculture. This option, if it was to be gone through, because it is over and above what's required for existing tile, there would be the compensation aspect of this removal. So the 5.25 acres. I guess essentially we're now going. The end result is the same. We're looking at removal for farm tile drainage, but we're going in a different direction, and we're actually clearing woodlot at the same time. It sounds the same, but it is a different way of doing this. So there still would be the compensation of the 5.25 acres.
Thank you for clarifying.
May I?
Mr. Ramos?
Again, clarification on that. If Tim was to go back up to the original with the 2 cuts, so we have 2 triangles of bush, I think it said it was 4.4 acres for this versus 5.5 or whatever the other one was there. That's only 1 acre difference, and if I trade land, as my understanding, if I trade land and we do this deal for the 5.5 and I'm compensating with marginal land, I cannot apply for any grants, etc., to help with the tree planting on the marginal land. So in that case, I'm better off to go with this option. And then at least I can still get some of my trees paid for the marginal land, versus going with the other option. I can't get any trees paid for because I've traded that land.
If I may, Madam Chair. So,
Yes,
Mr. Rombouts, having heard all these options, what is your preference at this point in time? Is it this option versus the next option?
I'll sound like I'm going to sound like I'm not a nice person by saying this, which it's not my style by any means. But if I go with the option that is in front of us on this table, and in 5 years, probably wouldn't be me anymore at that point with my age, but it'd be my kids or somebody. There's probably going to be an application to get rid of the 2 triangles. I'll just be honest, because those triangles make no sense from any farmer standpoint. So yeah, really, all in all, I'd better go with this, but I'd rather square it off the way the other option is and just square the top off and leave a square chunk of bush versus 2 triangles, right? But I also want to get this marginal land planted into trees, and that is not cheap, because I planted 20-some acres 5 years ago into trees, and it cost me $3,000 an acre to plant that. And if I'm going to plant another 20-plus acres at $3,000 an acre, again, I mean, we're talking fairly large expense that according to any grant paperwork for getting grants for trees, you can't have any other deals attached to those trees. So if I trade land, I am quite sure that I cannot get any grant for putting those trees in. Therefore, it's a full $3,000, or that's 5 years ago. It's probably, with inflation, it's probably $4,000 or $4,500 now. And that gets awfully expensive. I don't see a whole lot of people in town throwing out hundreds of thousands of dollars to help the environment. So I guess that's just my thoughts on that.
Just, Madam Chair, just a question for Mr. Payne. Mr. Payne, if this option if the board opted for this option that's currently on the screen, the original option had 4.4 acres removal with no replanting, as I understand it correctly, whereas this option has 5.25 total removal with some replanting obligations. What would be the expectation in terms of replanting? How many acres?
So as I said, the underlying factor is the drainage. However, this option here is considered removal of a woodland, and then it will be tiled to be farmed. The option in the top is strictly for drainage purposes. So to me, these are 2 separate things, albeit we're trying to achieve the same outcome. Every landowner that applies to just clear land will then be tiling it. So the end result is both areas will be tiled, but this one is to clear it for efficient farming and then do the tiling.
And under that,
So,
yeah.
therefore, it would be subject to the compensation. If Mr. Roundboats was to get his application approved for 22 acres, he would be paying to plant 22 acres with no compensation or grants available. So, again, we're still in the same compensation, but now for 5.25 acres instead of 22 acres that Mr. Roundboats will have out of pocket. If he chooses to do additional work in his marginal lands, it can be set up as two separate projects, and then marginal lands outside of the 5.25 would probably be available for grants. It would just be, so say he had 15 acres that he'd like to retire, 5.25 would be one project compensated, and the remaining 9.75 acres could be a separate project and therefore be available for grants through the Conservation Authority.
And just to clarify, Mr. Payne, if the board went with this option, the compensation, the replanting under this option would require what, another 5 acres?
Yeah, it would require the 5.25 acres. That is my interpretation. So I guess that is ultimately up to Mr. Roundboats if he is willing to modify his application.
Excuse me.
So maybe for last chance, Mr. Roundboats. So I guess we have the original application with the original recommendation, which is that triangular stuff, and or this option with the replanting of 5.25 acres. Again, we've heard you at this point in time. Do you prefer one over the other?
Yep, I do. I prefer the triangles.
Okay.
Purely on a dollars and cents basis. That's the only reason. It makes no sense environmentally or anything else, but on a dollars and cents for myself, that's what makes the most sense at this point.
And just a question for Mr. Payne. Mr. Payne, the triangles, those are your original recommendations, correct? You might be on mute, Mr. Payne.
This option here would not be subject to the Woodlands Hearings Board, nor require the full exemption process because it is an exemption under tile drainage. So if Mr. Roundboats chooses to go this route, then that would go through the exemption process for farm tile drainage.
Okay. So that being heard, Mr. Roundboats, in other words, you would be withdrawing your application. Do you wish to withdraw your application if you're going to go forward with this option?
Yep. At this point, I do. Yep.
All right. So then we'll ask you to have that quick little email to Mr. Payne. And for the board, at this point in time, if Mr. Roundboats is going to withdraw his application, as long as we see that withdrawal in writing in the next little while, we can adjourn this board hearing sine die, which means that without a return date. And if there's a return date needed, then we can do so. And I think I would need, there is currently a motion on the table moved by Councillor Arnold, seconded by Councillor Marriott, that other option, not this one, be approved by the board. But if for the note purposes or for the minute purposes, we'll say that motion will be withdrawn, and the next motion, if the board is in agreement with this, again, we'll have it moved by board member Arnold and seconded by board member Marriott, that the board hearing be adjourned sine die, which simply means that it's adjourned without sending it back for a hearing, on the understanding that Mr. Roundboats will be withdrawing his application.
Stefan, Mr. Roundboats had his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
It's okay. I just want to make sure he's heard.
Oh, I just I want to make sure that I get it sent in writing to the right person or whoever I need to get it to. It's been Terry Dewsbury that has been emailing me the contact stuff and everything. Is that who I email back then to make sure I get it to the right location?
We will send you, I believe we have your email address, Mr. Rumbouts, and we'll have somebody reach out to you today with the appropriate email address. Miss Dewsbury is happily retired. And, yes, and her replacement is on the line, and she'll reach out to you and make that contact.
Thank you.
Okay, and for the board's purposes, I guess we have a motion on the table moved by Board Member Arnold, seconded by Board Member Marriott, that the hearing be adjourned sine die, which is SINEDIE. That means that it's adjourned without a return date, on the understanding that the applicant is withdrawing his application.
Thank you, everyone.
You'll need a vote on that.
All in favor? Thank you.